I hope that the viewers of this video become aware of Starmount AlwaysCare and Unum, I don't know how to pronounce it, UNUM. But also I hope that the viewers become smarter consumers and don't allow themselves to be fatigued into paying something they shouldn't have to pay for. I needed a little bit of periodontal work done, actually 3 sections of periodontal work done in my mouth. I went to a reputable provider of periodontal services close to where I live, and after he did the analysis, he's the one who identified the 3 areas that needed work. At the time, I was with Starmount AlwaysCare, which now I believe is part of Unum, however you say it. And I called them and asked, what do I need to provide them in order to ensure that the procedure is covered? And they told me that they would work with the provider of the services, and I made the provider aware of that. Now, before I go a little further into the story, there's something that your viewers need to understand about all medical procedures, whether they're periodontal or surgical, whatever. Everything that happens to you is given a procedure code, and it's a number that identifies the specific work that is going to be done on you. And those procedure codes are used by all insurers in your place of residence, whatever country you may be in. And what happens is your provider communicates to your insurer that a certain procedure code is going to be done. And the insurer then looks at your policy and says to themselves, does that policy cover this procedure code? And if so, you're given the approval to go ahead. So that's important to understand, because a major problem that I had with Starmount AlwaysCare was what happened after I got the procedure. What happened was my provider was expecting that Starmount AlwaysCare would pay the amount that they're supposed to pay, and if there was any left over, I would have to pay that out of my pocket. What ended up happening was Starmount AlwaysCare decided that no, that was the wrong procedure code and that they wanted to bill it under some different procedure code, and so they communicated that to my provider. Now, of course, by billing it under that procedure code, I would be not as covered as billing it under the procedure that I actually got from my medical provider. So my provider called Starmount AlwaysCare back and said, "Look, well, the procedure that we actually gave him was approved, and it should have, and this is the number." And they communicated that back. Starmount AlwaysCare said, "We'll get back to you." Of course, it took them quite a while, several weeks, to get back to the provider. And the provider contacted me and said, "Well, Starmount AlwaysCare says we have to use this other procedure code." And I said, "Well, what's the other procedure code?" And I got the story from my provider that it's not the procedure that I actually received. Okay, so I then worked with my medical providers, my periodontal providers billing person. She was a very nice woman. She always tried very hard to be that person in between me over here and Starmount AlwaysCare over here and my provider in the middle. So everything I had to do initially, I had to work through my periodontal provider's billing person. She was having no luck getting Starmount to bill according to the correct procedure code. So then I said, okay, I'm going to reach out to Starmount. And I started talking to them. I explained the whole situation to them. And now this is where the second problem comes in. The people that you deal with, or that I dealt with at Starmount, they don't know where all your records are. So every time I called, they had to take many minutes to locate where all my records were. In fact, one woman that I dealt with at Starmount Always Care said something very close to, I don't know why they put these things in so many different places. I can never find them. And I thought to myself, I didn't say anything to the woman because it's not her job. I mean, it's not her fault. But I thought, yeah, I bet you I know why. Because if it's harder to find your records, then maybe you'll tire of calling and just pay more out of your pocket than you would have to if the correct procedure code was being used. So the woman finally found the procedure code. She had to call me back and she had to talk with her colleagues to figure out where all this information was. She finally called me back and I explained the situation to her again. She had the records and she said, okay, well, I'll have to give this to some of my colleagues internally. I think it was the people who review the medical procedure and the insurance policy and all the other information. Well, what happened was I ended up, and also the billing person at my periodontal provider ended up back and forth, having to deal with Starmount. And every single time, Starmount had some reason, some excuse why they couldn't accommodate, or why they couldn't find what they needed to find, or that they had to pass it on to someone else in order for that person to find it. Eventually, we got the right procedure code authorized. And then, of course, there were these pro forma apologies. Okay, so those were the first two problems. Then comes the waiting game. And this is where Starmount doesn't pay your provider. You pay them what your part of the service is, but they don't turn around and pay your provider. So now my provider, my periodontist, after some while, starts coming to me saying they're not paying according to the contract that you signed with us. You are actually responsible for the payment, so you're going to have to pay us. So that leads to another round of me calling Starmount and trying to get them to pay. And this goes on for months. If I remember correctly, it went on, I'm trying to remember in my case, I think it went on for three, maybe 4 months of me calling them, my periodontist provider's billing person calling them, and trying to get Starmount to pay my periodontist provider. This went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Now, why does this have to happen? This shouldn't be rocket science. It's look at the contract. Look at how much you agreed to pay. Did the person who received the services, in this case, me, pay Starmount? Well, yes, he did. So now it's Starmount's time to pay the provider. What they're doing is they are engaging in a game, in my opinion. They are engaging in a game to tire the provider or the person who received the services, to tire them out and to get the provider to say, you know what? We're not dealing with Starmount. They are refusing to pay what is your bill, and therefore you, meaning me, have to pay the bill. Now, they never actually got to that point with me because they are aware of this game. My providers, my medical providers, were aware of this game. And the lady I was dealing with, she's had long experience with this. And so I and my periodontist provider's billing lady were working on this. But it took 3 or 4 months for Starmount to finally pay up after I don't know how many phone calls. Now, this is just downright lousy treatment of customers. I was a customer of Starmount AlwaysCare. I paid my premiums always on time. It was just automatically paid. I didn't have to write the check. And for that, I got pushback on what the procedure was that I should have, that my provider should have done. The provider said, no, that's not what he needs. He needs this. That went on for weeks and weeks before I finally got the service. Once I got the service, then the whole waiting game thing went into play. Oh no, David Starmount hasn't paid, and you're legally responsible. I know. You will be paid, but then I had to work with their billing person for months. This is bad customer service, and they do it deliberately to tire you out so that you'll give up, or your provider will simply demand payment from you, which you've signed a contract to be responsible for the payment. And so the provider can choose to not deal with your insurer anymore, and they can start coming after you legally. Now, in my case, that didn't happen because my provider understood what was happening. So here's the bottom line. Starmount AlwaysCare, and now I believe that they're owned by Unum, they're bad customer service people. They play these games. But there's a game you can play. It's called capitalism. And the way capitalism is designed to work is you don't buy services from companies that have a reputation for being bad service providers. And you tell your friends and your colleagues your story, and you warn them away from those bad providers. If more of us play that game, that capitalism game, then more of these shady game playing providers, such as Starmount AlwaysCare, will start losing customers or find it more difficult to find customers because their reputation is now shared among the buying public, of which you are one and I am one. These companies know that they can wear you out. All you got to do is stick to your guns. And after you've dealt with them, tell the story. And that's what I'm doing here. I hope that my experience is something you never have to experience with Starmount AlwaysCare. But they won't change until you and I start talking amongst our friends, our colleagues, and telling them what a bad experience you had and your medical provider had dealing with them. So I hope this story helps. I hope that even if you are not yet or never were a subscriber to Starmount AlwaysCare, at least you'll get the point of the story and start acting like a smart capitalist consumer who wants to be treated decently and pay a fair price for a fair service. Well, I certainly don't expect that they're going to give me any money, which I wouldn't want to. I paid what I was supposed to pay. I think that if they're an ethical company that cares not just about their reputation, but how they treat their customers, I'd like to receive either a phone call or a letter apologizing for all of that egregious behavior and promising to change their procedures and their policies and to educate their people inside how to deal with situations like this. I'm an IT guy. If somebody can't find the data, it's because it's being deliberately hidden. So the lady that I was dealing with who said, I don't know why they always put this stuff in so many places, I can never find what I need. Well, that's part of the company strategy. Or maybe it's bad training. I don't know. But I think it's more the company strategy to make it harder for the subscriber, me and you, to get an issue resolved. So, yeah, a letter or a phone call saying, we understand what happened. We're appalled that it happened, and we are going to take action to change the way we do our business internally. Better yet, if they tell me that and then later on get back to me and say, Mr. Medici, this is what we did to solve the problem, and we want to thank you for bringing it to our attention because we really do care about our customers. That would be nice, but I'm not going to hold my breath.